Hey everybody, what's going on? Hellmite here, bringing another video from Grab the Lantern. Today, it's Tuesday and the patch notes have been posted, which means it's time for us to cover the top 5 changes of patch 13.5. I'll let you guys know what the biggest changes were and what changes you can be looking forward to in the coming weeks. 13.5 is a bit of an interesting one. I feel like there are a lot of cool, neat things to talk about, as well as one major change that, of course, will have a lot of players very excited. But suffice it to say, let's go ahead and jump right into things, starting with the number 5 change here all the way at the bottom, which are the changes to Triumph. Now, the reason I wanted to highlight this specifically is because I know a lot of players like Triumph. Getting the bonus heal when you get a takedown is a huge way to make sure that you don't turn that takedown into a trade, and the additional gold as well is enticing for some players. Now, importantly to note here, Triumph is being massively changed, so a lot more of its power has been shifted into a maximum health regeneration versus a missing health regeneration. This mostly means that you're going to get more health back when it's less useful, i.e. you're at full health, and less health back when it would be more useful, i.e. you're at low health. This means that there are a lot of situations that you would have survived on the previous patch, thanks to Triumph, that you will no longer survive. This means that if you're going for those risky plays, under tower specifically, where you're able to survive that last tower shot because you got a Triumph proc, that is going to be a lot harder and a lot less likely to happen because of the fact that you're going to be healing for less. Very, very important to note here that you're not going to heal as much with Triumph. Moving on to the number 4 change here, I wanted to talk about LeBlanc, actually. She got a really, really powerful set of changes on this patch, mostly regarding her Q, which now has bonus damage to minions, and will refund its cost and some of its cooldown whenever it kills a minion. LeBlanc has historically struggled with wave clear. Her only AoE ability is, of course, her W, which is also her mobility, so it's her only way of getting into or out of a bad situation, and it's also part of her burst combo. This means that she's had issues maintaining the wave, and generally has some of the lowest CS per minute of any champion in the game. Now that the Q refunds its mana cost and some of its cooldown on kill, LeBlanc can use it to sort of spot CS, meaning that she is going to miss a lot less CS, and she'll have this cooldown available more often, even if she's using it to last hit. This is a massive power boost for LeBlanc. It means that you can successfully CS without costing yourself a major portion of your burst damage, and it means that more frequently you'll be able to go for these burst damage combos without having to Q a minion and then wait however long to get your Q back off cooldown. Huge change for LeBlanc. I do think this will have a positive effect on her win rate. It isn't maybe the biggest change, but I certainly think it will be a very powerful change for LeBlanc regardless. Moving on to the number 3 changes here, I wanted to talk about Gangplank. Gangplank is phenomenally annoying right now, I would argue, as a top lane player myself, thanks to the Essence Reaver Navori Quickblades build that gives him effectively limitless mana and very low cooldowns overall, meaning that he can constantly threaten with barrel, he's constantly going to be queuing you, and generally speaking, he's a very annoying champion to deal with, right? Specifically call out, however, that his win rate is typically skewed by lower skilled players picking up Gangplank to try and play him, doing very poorly, and therefore pulling the win rate down. That means that if Gangplank is at 50% win rate, it means for his mains, he's probably doing extraordinarily well, and for everyone else, they're probably losing a lot more games. But this means that Gangplank is likely going to be a lower win rate percentage than 50%. If Gangplank is at 45, for example, that might actually be where he's supposed to be. Suffice it to say, these changes are nerfs intended to get Gangplank to be less of that annoying top laner who always has everything available all of the time. One of the biggest changes that they do make here is Powder Keg will now show its charges underneath Gangplank's health bar, so every player in the game will always know how many barrels Gangplank has at his disposal and when he gets barrels back. I think this will have an adverse effect on his win rate. I do think that this will make him easier to play against if you know if he has a barrel or not, but I also think that it's not that big of a nerf overall. Corki, for example, Riot also added an ammunition system to his missiles when he was oppressive in the mid lane, and that basically didn't move the needle on his win rate at all. I feel it's going to be a very similar case for Gangplank right now, and as a result, I feel like though this may hurt Gangplank, I don't actually think it's going to nerf him that hard, and I think that Gangplank will continue to be a threat until Riot give him a more substantial amount of set of nerfs on a later patch. Suffice it to say, it's important to note that if you do play Gangplank, players will know how many barrels you have going forward. Moving on to the number 2 changes here, I wanted to talk about Azir. Azir has a really large set of changes, which of course aren't where I'm currently looking, but Azir has a lot of really important changes here that are mostly aimed at nerfing him out of pro play, with a secondary goal of trying to buff him up for casual play. Most of these changes, there are a ton of things that happened here, and Freak goes into a very long deep dive about the Azir changes over on his channel. I will have that video linked in the description if you want the full nitty-gritty and you're super interested in the super fine detail work of what's changing for Azir, but I'll cover high level what is changing for Azir right now. Azir's turret is now a 30-second turret instead of a full minute, but the cooldown has also been cut in half to compensate as well, so Azir will basically have turret when he wants it as opposed to right now where you're not really going to use it very often. The damage now scales with Azir's AP, and it also applies Azir's on-hit spell effects, so things like Rise Crystal Scepter, the tower will provide as well. Conquering Sands now has a mana cost that increases with rank, meaning that the more points you put in a queue, the more mana it will cost you to use Q, which is going to mean fewer queues overall. W no longer grants passive attack speed, but it does increase the base damage of your soldiers' attacks per rank, and additionally the 3 soldier attack speed passive has been removed, and finally Riot have walked back the AP ratio increase that they made in 13.4 on his E. That is back to what it was pre 13.4. Overall, I think these changes are not necessarily going to make Azir a viable champion in casual play. I do think that these are a lot of casual-friendly changes, but he's still a very complicated champion to play, and I don't feel like a lot of players are still going to be able to play him effectively. But I do think these champions will accomplish at least half of their goal, which is getting him out of professional play, where he's been the dominant mid laner for quite some time. I do think they'll succeed in that approach, and honestly, that's probably fine, as Riot have had Azir on the must-balance for pro playlist for quite some time, and if they're able to get any wins for us casuals, that's great. If they're not, that's totally fine, just as long as they don't have to see Azir in every single pro play game moving forwards. Finally, the number one change on this week's patch, and something that people have been looking forward to for a long time now, is the Yuumi mid-scope update. Now, people have been really looking forward to this for quite some time, though honestly these changes I believe were announced at the end of last year, which is not that long ago in all honesty, so these changes came through quite fast. I went into a deeper dive on all these changes in a previous video. That will be linked in the description as well if you want the full nitty-gritty about all the changes, but again, I'll cover high level here what is changing about the cap. First, Yuumi's heal and Yuumi's shield have swapped places. Her passive is now what heals herself and champions, and her E is now a shield, meaning that you'll have to actually be more cognizant of what's happening in lane in order to successfully shield your ally when you need to. Additionally, Yuumi now becomes a best friend with the champion she's attached to, who's killed the most units while Yuumi has been attached, and she gains extra bonuses when she's attached to her best friend versus anybody else. Yuumi's Q now only is guidable for the first half of the ability. After that, it accelerates in a straight line and is no longer guidable. Yuumi's W no longer grants adaptive force to Yuumi and her friend, but it does grant additional heal and shield power to Yuumi, and her best friend gains additional on-hit healing when Yuumi's attached to them. And Yuumi's ultimate now follows her mouse for each wave, and it damages enemies and heals allies that are in the area of effect, but it no longer has a hard crowd control component. Now, I think these are going to address a lot of the things that made Yuumi a very frustrating champion to deal with. The Q being essentially a guided projectile is gone. Yuumi being able to AFK heal her friend is gone. Yuumi having phenomenally powerful peel and engage capabilities with her ultimate is gone. Realistically, though, Yuumi is still an attached champion. If you're frustrated by the fact that you can't target her all the time, that is not really changing, but I also think that because her outputs require her to be a lot better at the game, it's going to overall address her frustration and make her a lot more of an obvious champion. Yuumi is very much so just an enchanter now and not a sort of does everything for everyone champion, and as a result, I think this will make her feel a lot better to play against. I think this will also make her a lot more forgiving for newer players to play, which is partially the goal of these changes. And that's going to be it for me today, guys. Those are the highlights of patch 13.5. Let me know which changes you're most excited for down in the comments section below. I'm excited for the GP nerfs. I do think they need to nerf them harder, but I'm excited regardless. But let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed the video today, go ahead and leave it a like. And if you really enjoyed the video, consider subscribing. I upload a video every Monday, Friday, and on patch days like today as well. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it. And I'll talk to you all later.